Hello, everyone. Welcome to this very, very special edition of our Ask Her webinar. This time we're calling it the President's Edition. As you can see, I am surrounded by wonderful presidents and CEOs. So we're taking the time to honor our outgoing president and CEO of Washington Area Women's Foundation, Jennifer Lockwood-Shabat, and also welcoming our interim president and CEO, Jackie Lendsey. As you know, Ask Her is an interview series with women leaders, our partners, community members, and supporters who work tirelessly for women and girls. Be sure to join the conversation that I will be tweeting while talking. On Twitter at the Women's Foundation, use the hashtag AskHerSeries. And if you're new to the Women's Foundation, we are a community supported foundation that invests in the power of women and girls of color in the DC region. We do our work through grant making and advocacy, which you'll hear more about. And we're intentional about centering the voices and lived experiences of women and girls of color to influence policymakers in philanthropy to dismantle sexist and racist systems. So for those of you who are joining us today, this conversation may leave you in tears. So this is your warning. I will try not to cry because my makeup is cute, but this is Jennifer's last week with us. So for anyone who may be triggered, please be sure to keep tissues nearby, including you, Jennifer. So Jennifer, how are you?
I'm good, Mercy. I'm gonna try not to cry.
Okay, Jackie, how are you? Someone commented that these glasses are giving life, and I agree. How are you?
Jennifer and I have this great thing in common. We love glasses and glasses that are, just stand out. So, thanks to whoever said that. But yeah, this is something we do together. But I'm fine. Missing Jennifer already, and she's not even gone yet.
And our jean jackets. Jackie, I was worried you also would show up with your jean jacket today.
Wait a minute. I have my jean jacket.
I almost texted you to say, are we going to be matching with?
I've got my jean jacket.
Glasses and let me put on my glasses too. Hold on. Okay, glasses and jackets. Love it. So really quickly, I'm going to mention just a few of many of Jennifer's accomplishments during her time at the Women's Foundation, and then I'm going to disappear, and Jackie and Jennifer can chat. So Jennifer has adopted a gender and racial justice lens to our work and implemented trust-based philanthropic practices. She launched the DC Young Women's Initiative to focus local investment on issues identified by youth of color and providing funding to young women directly through an innovative participatory grant program, the Rockstar Fund. She led the effort to become the official local funding partner of the National Me Too Fund and launched a broader safety and violence prevention portfolio to invest in survivor support organizations offering culturally specific services to traditionally underserved populations. Jennifer, I hope you remember you've done all of these things. She has done so many things. She's become a more vocal community advocate with staff representing women and girls on more than 10 advocacy coalitions and philanthropic collaboratives annually, working towards policy changes that expand affordable access to early care and education for families, reducing harsh disciplinary practices in schools for girls of color, and ensuring funding for programs supporting parenting youth. So that's just a few things, along with, of course, some things in the office, like maybe winning the Office Olympics, always participating in our Halloween costumes, providing amazing snacks all the time, amazing advice, and more that I'll tell you later. I don't want to take up the conversation. Everyone knows who Jennifer is, but I'm going to mention your bio very, very quickly. She's our outgoing president and CEO. Jennifer joined the foundation in 2008, providing strategic guidance while leading the program development and communications functions. She's been named a community champion by Capital One and the Washington Mystics, A Woman Who Means Business, and Power 100 honoree by the Washington Business Journal, and an outstanding diversity leader by the Washington, D.C. chapter of the Association of Fundraising Professionals. She was also a 2019 to 2020 Philanthropy Forward Fellow through the Neighborhood Funders Group and the Aspen Institute Forum for Community Solutions. She resides in Northern Virginia with her husband and 2 daughters and is an outdoor enthusiast. So welcome, Jennifer. And then of course, Jackie. Jackie Lendsey is the interim president and CEO of Washington Area Women's Foundation and has more than 25 years experience leading national and local nonprofit organizations. Since 2012, she has served as an interim executive professional, skilled at guiding organizations like ours through transition in a limited time frame. She holds a BS from Adelphi University and a master's in education from Howard University for the Bisons on the Zoom. She's a native Washingtonian and is a member of Leadership Greater Washington. Welcome, Jackie. And hello to everyone joining in. Please be sure to put all of your questions in the Q&A box, and we're gonna have a conversation between Jennifer and Jackie. I'm gonna disappear because I'm not a president, but I'll be back to make sure that we get all your questions answered, and have a great time.
Well, thank you, Mercy, and welcome to everyone on the call. We have our discussion here will involve just a few questions between myself and Jennifer, and hopefully there'll be a lot that you can learn not only about Jennifer and her career, but also just about what's going to happen or what's happening during the transition at the foundation. So Jennifer, you've been at the Women's Foundation for a decade or more. And can you tell us a little bit about your journey? What led you to the Women's Foundation? And having arrived at the Women's Foundation, what inspired you to become president and CEO?
First of all, I'm so excited to be here with you, Jackie, in conversation. When Mercy and Martine first suggested we do this, I was like, I'm not sure, but I think this is a really great conversation, and I'm looking forward to diving a little bit deeper with you. In terms of what led me to the Women's Foundation, it was really very much a personal journey. My career prior to coming here had been really in the federal realm. So I had worked on the Hill for a bit. I had worked for the Women's Caucus, a bipartisan Women's Caucus on the House side for a bit. I worked for a National Family Planning Organization. And so I really knew and understood federal programs and policies that benefited women and their families. So I had a great national sort of bird's eye level. But I realized I did not know much about what was happening in my own community. And I have 2 daughters. They were babies at the time. They were 4 and 8. They're now 21 and 18, but they were babies. And I started my journey to the Women's Foundation really very much from a personal perspective as a mom who wanted my girls to understand their place in the world. My husband and I both, we didn't come from much growing up. We're the first to go to college in our families, and our girls are being raised in a very different socioeconomic environment and status than my husband and I did. And I wanted them to understand the privilege that they were living and the access to opportunities that they had as a result of that. But I wanted to do it in a way that wasn't, the typical, when I was your age, I walked 3 miles in the snow kind of thing. I wanted them to be able to really see and understand community around them. And the only way I could do that was for me to understand the community around me and the organizations and leaders who were working to make a better world for women and girls. And so my journey as the foundation was first as a volunteer. The former vice president of programs, Marjorie Sims, at the foundation, she and I had worked together in a previous job on the Hill and with the Women's Caucus. And I kept bugging her. I was like, I want to come to the Women's Foundation, I want to come to the Women's Foundation. And at the time, we had a volunteer grant-making program called the Leadership Awards. And so I volunteered doing that for a couple of years. And that was an opportunity to really review grant proposals, to engage in the participatory grant making process, to go on site visits, and to really learn about the rich, rich nonprofit community we have here in the DMV, and to understand the challenges and opportunities that we're facing women and girls. And so after going through that process, a program officer position opened, and I applied, and I just kept knocking on the door, calling Marjorie, emailing her, saying, you know, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to make a career change that combines the personal journey that I was on as a mom and wanting my girls to understand their place in the world and how to give back. And I wanted to combine that with professional. And so the timing worked out that a position opened right as I was thinking about making that career change. And so I became a program officer back in 2008. So it was quite a journey, but I've loved every minute of it.
Well, you know, it sounds like quite a journey learning more about the community, but then it's more of a journey and a different kind of journey to decide to become or to aspire to be president and CEO of the foundation. So going from program development and all of that, but to actually being the leader of the foundation. How did you move in that direction?
You know, it's funny because I don't think there was anything intentional about it. I think if you had asked me in 2008 or 2010 or 12, I don't know that I would have said to anyone, oh, I want to be a CEO. I want to be an executive director. I don't know that that was in my line of sight in terms of what I wanted next. I have a deep, deep passion for the program work, and that's my background. And I think I was always a little nervous that as you get promoted and as you sort of move up, you become, you know, much further removed from the programmatic work, which is really my love. But it's been a constant change from day one when I started at the Women's Foundation, and as I was promoted and as I started to take on different aspects of the job, moving from program to development, being the number 2 as vice president under Nikki Gorin, who was our previous president and CEO, I began to understand that I thought I had the skill sets to be transferred into being a CEO. And so I was very fortunate that Nikki and I developed such a deep partnership and friendship that when she transitioned over the Meyer Foundation, it was a very natural transition for me to step into the role as being the president and CEO. And I embraced, I was nervous about it, but I really embraced it and felt that I was ready at that moment in time. Maybe 4 or 5 years prior to that, I would have said that I wasn't ready for it and I needed more time. I don't know that anything can ever prepare you for it, but yeah, I was asked and I decided to raise my hand, even though I was a little bit nervous about it. And I'm glad that I did. And I think, can I turn the tables for a second and ask you a similar question?
Sure, you can turn the tables.
So, I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot because we actually, I think it was last year this time, or maybe a little bit earlier, that we did an Ask Her interview that was a written piece. But we probably talked for a good hour and a half, I think, about you know, the work at DCFPI, but we really talked a lot about the work as an interim CEO and what that looks like and how you came to that. And I know you have a really rich, deep, long history of experience in both national and local nonprofits. But I wonder if you could share more with us about how you came to the interim CEO work. And it's a very unique and special, and I think incredibly needed body of work in the nonprofit sector that I wish more would take advantage of. But can you share a little bit about what led you to the journey, and then why the Women's Foundation?
Yeah, well, you know, what led me to interim executive work, nonprofit interim executive work specifically, I think I've been very fortunate in my professional career. I've had the opportunity to do almost everything I ever wanted to do, and some things I never thought I'd ever do or even thought I wanted to do. But I always took advantage, no matter where I was in my career, of the next opportunity and being mentored by any number of individuals. And I tell the story, be careful what you wish for. I had run programs and community development and the board and the foundation at a large healthcare system here in the region. I have to say I'm a native Washingtonian, so other than leaving to go to school, I've been here all my life and worked here all my life. And then I worked nationally for Planned Parenthood Federation of America, doing their public policy work, lobbying, grassroots organizing. And then I decided, I want to be the CEO of a small national nonprofit. Well, be careful what you wish for. I got that opportunity and I ran a small national nonprofit for 7 years, and I had to do everything, as as a CEO. So,
Yeah.
I did that, and then I came back locally to run a startup nonprofit here in DC, EdBuild. And after that, I worked for a small foundation. And then I was sort of like, okay, what are you going to do next? And that's when I decided all the things that I had learned and done as a national and as a local nonprofit executive director put me in line to work with organizations in transition. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of formal interim executive network, interim executive colleagues out there. So I took advantage of some training to make sure I knew what I was doing. And then I got my first interim assignment running a national membership organization, Voices for America's Children. And running that organization while the board was doing its job of trying to figure out who the next leader would be. And I just loved the work. It is challenging, but it's quick. You're in and you're out. You're not keeping the job, and you go in telling everybody, I am pre-fired and I accept that. And it's just working with different organizations, using what I know, using the skills that I've learned, but keeping an organization going and helping the board to figure out where it's going next. That's how I moved into the career. So I guess you could say it was deliberate to the extent that I did not want to go back to being a full-time nonprofit executive. I wanted to help nonprofits through transition, which I thought I could do. And it's been an interesting ride. And I think also how I got to the Women's Foundation. Yeah, so it's been an interesting ride. So you never know where your next interim assignment is going to come from. And I was at the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. And my colleagues and I in the interim business talk about this all the time, where we like, oh, okay, well, the next job may come along, or we may not work for a couple of months, which is the other thing you have to accept as an interim. Anyway, I was leaving DCFPI and the foundation job was available. I'm sorry, it wasn't available. The board was looking for the next person, and they had decided to hire an interim. And I knew the foundation from when it was started. And I had a deep affinity for the work of the foundation, having been around since then. And at one point, not for long, but at one point I was a member of the African American Women Giving Circle. So, and I have many friends who served on the board or who have been active in the foundation or on the leadership council. So, I felt like I know this organization. And if I'm fortunate enough to be able to move through the process, I would love to be the interim helping the Washington Area Women's Foundation through this next transition.
And I think another sort of little known fact for people is that when the Women's Foundation started our racial equity journey about 6-7 years ago now, one of the things that we did was we looked to some of our colleagues for best practices and how they had incorporated racial justice into their work. And the Consumer Health Foundation here in DC is really a leader in the philanthropic field and had been doing this work for a long time. And Jackie, you were on their board at the time. And I had asked Unique, as the president and CEO, if she and a board member would be willing to come in and speak to our board about your experiences. And so you came as the board member of the Consumer Health Foundation and shared your perspective with our board about what the journey looked like and things for us to think about. And so in many ways, I feel like this is a full circle moment, that we are where we are as an organization, and that you are circling back after your initial stint with the African American Women's Giving Circle to take on this interim president and CEO role. So I wanted to share that with everyone, because I think there's always something special about the Women's Foundation. There are lots of deep connections, and that's just yet another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I was thinking, I'm looking, Marcy has done such a wonderful job at putting together our little Q&A to talk through. But I think one of the things that I've been reflecting on as I'm getting ready to step away from the Women's Foundation for a little bit, not leaving, because this work is near and dear to my heart, and I will always be here championing and pushing and cheering on and doing what I can to support it. But I think there is something very special about the way in which women engage in leadership and how we lead and how we show up. And I've been reflecting on that a lot as folks have asked me questions about how or why I decided to become a CEO and how do I lead differently or maybe not lead differently. And so I'm curious from your perspective, because I certainly feel like there's something special and different about the way in which women show up and lead. And I'm curious from your perspective, what makes women leaders so special in the nonprofit and philanthropic fields, and sort of what's different about what we all bring to the table?
Wow, great question. I think what makes us special is our ability to listen and our ability to translate what we hear into effective leadership. So it's not enough to just come into an organization and figure out, how much money you need to make the organization run, the finances, all of that. You also have to be able to translate that to not only staff, but also to the community and to others. So I think it's our ability to listen and then translate what we hear. I think we're bold. I just love the word bold. I think we are bold. And I think women leaders are bold. There used to be an expectation that women couldn't run organizations. Well, that's not true. We run things all the time. And I think it's because we're bold. I think it's because we're always looking for the next challenge. Even if we don't think of it or articulate it that way, we're always looking for the next challenge. I think we also have the ability to communicate. I think women leaders communicate well, and it's a plus, but it's also a tool. We're able to communicate to a vast and a varied audience the work that we do. We're able to reach out to donors and to funders and to corporations, but we're able to reach out in a way that says, these are the issues that are important, and these are the issues you need to think are important also. I think that's what women leaders do. I think we're fearless. We're absolutely fearless. I've worked with some amazing women throughout my career, and I've had some amazing women as models of leadership who probably never even thought they were being leaders. But I sat and I learned and I watched and I listened and I asked questions, and they shared with me their wisdom. And I can go back to women who went to college with my mother and who were some of my best teachers. So I think that's the other thing we do well. We're teachers. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I started my career as a teacher, and I have always said that if you can teach 35 young people 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, 10 months out of the year, you can run any organization and make it run well. And so I think that's what it is about us. We are bold, we are listeners, we're communicators, we're facilitators, and we're challenged, and we enjoy the challenge. You know, you could say that about men too, but I think those are words that work very well and say a lot about us, especially those of us who are women leaders. I'll also say I've worked for any number of women leaders. Some I thoroughly enjoyed and some I probably didn't, but even the ones that I didn't enjoy working with, I learned something from them. And I learned how I wanted to be when I was a leader. And I learned how I wanted to work with individuals and work with staff and work with a team and build a team. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. I love the be bold and fearless piece, and framing it in a really powerful, uplifting, positive way. Because I think sometimes the words that are used to describe women's leadership can be negative, right? It's aggressive. But the bold and fearless is such a wonderful framing for how women leaders show up. So I love that. Thank you. I'm going to put a little Post-it note on my computer.
Well, let me ask you, during your time at the foundation, what would you say was your biggest challenge or hurdle? And how did you get over it?
Oh gosh, my biggest challenge and hurdle. I think I have a couple maybe that I want to share if time allows. So the first would be, I think the way I want to frame this is getting comfortable with change. So from day one, I mean, literally my first day on the job, I walked in and the other program officer who had already been there shared with me that she was leaving in 2 weeks. And so literally day one, there was a change. And then 3 months later, there was another. So there was kind of constant change from the very first day. And I think that I had worked at places where I had been there in my previous job, I'd been there for 10 years, right? So the site with 5 people who worked there the entire time that I'd been there. And so it took a lot to get myself to a place where I felt comfortable with change. Change is always, always hard. But I began to build the skill set of getting comfortable with change, embracing change, being able to operate in that gray area of sort of uncertainty and not knowing, rather than everything being black and white and you know this or you know that. But it was certainly a challenge for me in the beginning to build that skill set, which is, I think, something now that I am very comfortable with operating in that gray area and uncertainty and change, but it's not for everyone. And it takes a while to flex that muscle and be willing to embrace it. I think the other biggest challenge for me, just in all transparency, was when I was promoted to president and CEO, having been the number 2 internally, and following a very dynamic leader in Nikki Gordon. And Nikki and I are friends, and we've talked about this a lot, so I'm not sharing anything that she and I haven't already discussed, but I think there was certainly some uncertainty about, could I move from the number 2 to the number 1? That I was great sort of behind the scenes doing all these pieces, but Nikki and I are very different personalities. We lead in different ways. We show up in different ways. And I think there were just some questions among folks about, could I really do it? Could I really be a number 1? And I got a lot of advice about how I was supposed to do it, right down to what I should be wearing, what lipstick I should have. I mean, a lot of advice about how I was supposed to show up. And it was a real challenge to move through that, to hear what people had to say, to digest their advice, and begin to sort of parse out what was true to me and what I could take and move forward with, and what was a bit of noise in the background that I needed to let go of. And this idea that I needed to prove myself in a particular way. And I realized that for me, and I think there's so many conversations about this going on writ large, but authenticity is really important, and being able to show up in the way that I wanted to show up. So a power suit and red lipstick is not me, right? Like this is me. And so I needed to find the place where I felt comfortable in my own skin, showing up the way that I wanted to show up, leading in a way that I wanted to, which was really from a place of openness and authenticity and transparency. And once I got comfortable with that, I think I settled into things and sort of knew with certainty, like, I can do this. I'm going to do it my way, and my way might be different, but I can do this. But it was definitely, it was a challenge in that transition of sort of, who am I going to be when you move from a number 2 to a number 1, and what are other people's expectations of who I'm going to be?
Interesting, because I mean, you use such great words there. You know, the challenge and change, and those are all those kinds of words that we talk about also when we talk about women leaders. Going back to the other question, I mean, challenge, change, being comfortable, you know, and recognizing your own value, your own worth, and once you became comfortable with that, moving forward as the leader that you became, running the Washington Area Women's Foundation. That's great. So I'll turn it around. What's your proudest moment having led the Washington Area Women's Foundation?
I have a couple. I mean, I said this in my letter when I announced that I would be stepping down, that my proudest moment is where we are right now. And that holds true. I mean, this staff is, now this is where I'm going to cry. It's a small but mighty team. We're 7 people. And the way in which everyone on staff, and this is across the country, I know, but the way in which people have had to dig so deep and work so hard this last year and a half with the pandemic. We're small, we're 7 people. We pivoted virtually like everybody did. A lot of our staff have young children, school-age children, for whom they're trying to do distance learning while managing work at the same time. And it was a massive challenge. And I am so deeply, deeply humbled and proud of the entire team for hanging in there. It was really hard. You know, I think my other proud moment is we've built a culture in this organization that is all about supporting one another and providing the utmost flexibility that we can. And we did that. And I'm sure there are things we could have done better. And I'm sure there are ways that we can improve. But I am just so, so deeply, deeply, deeply proud of how the staff just stepped up and moved mountains, literally, in this last year. And our pivot to focus on investing women and girls of color is an incredibly proud moment for me. It's where this work needed to be. I think maybe we're a little late coming to it, but I am so, so proud that we have pivoted to be very intentionally focused on women and girls of color in the DMV. And I can't wait to see what comes next.
Yeah.
So.
Hello.
Oh,
Hey,
there's Mercy.
I'm back. That was very sweet. So I hate to stop this heartwarming conversation, but want to make sure we have a chance to hear from our audience. Some of you have been putting your questions in the Q&A box or tweeting them out. Feel free to continue to add them as you think of them. So Jennifer, you actually kind of answered this first question from our team, but I'll flip it a little bit. Is there a moment that stands out for you as a time when you were really proud of the foundation, the work, or a particular partner? So I think you talked about us as a team, but maybe some of the work or a partner.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really proud of, I'm proud of there are two things. So the first would be the partnerships that we have with other women's foundations across the country. Folks may not know, but there's a strong, powerful network of women's foundations across the country and nationwide. And I have had the privilege since day one, when I started in 2008, of being a part of many partnerships and collaborations with other women's foundations. And I think a really proud moment for us was during the Obama administration, when the White House Council on Women and Girls was working on advancing their equity for women and girls of color work. And they approached a number of women's foundations to say, are you interested in stepping up and into this space? The New York Women's Foundation had created the Young Women's Initiative in New York City, really under the leadership of Girls for Gender Equity. And there were 7 of us that raised our hands and said, yes, absolutely, we are going to step up. We will center the voices and lived experiences of young women and girls of color. And we were one of those initial foundations. And so having the opportunity to partner with Tina Chen and Valerie Jarrett, Kalisha Jesus, Jordan Brooks at the White House Council of Women and Girls, and being able to be on stage at the United State of Women in that final year of the Obama administration to really formally, publicly declare our commitment to young women of color is a really proud moment, and to be in collaboration with my sister friends, as we like to call one another. It's a real learning opportunity for all of us. So I think that's one that comes to mind. And then I think the second is, I do want another shout out to staff. It is the way in which we responded to the pandemic. The Greater Washington Community Foundation put together an emergency response fund, and our team sat on all of the various committees and work groups that reviewed and made decisions about where emergency response dollars were committed. And I think it was just an amazing example of how local philanthropy really pulled together and partnered and collaborated in a way that hadn't been done before. And it was that process that actually helped influence how we then, as an entity, would think about our own response to the pandemic.
That's a perfect segue into making sure everyone goes to our website after this conversation, the womensfoundation.org, and be sure to check out our programming and, of course, the Stand Together Fund, which Jennifer was just talking about. The next question we have here is from Martine about, and it's for you, Jackie.
Mm-hmm.
This is a fun question. Is there anything that surprises you about the foundation now that you're on the inside versus how you've engaged with or worked with the foundation before?
Surprises me. I don't know that there's anything that surprises me. I expected that the foundation would have a team that works so well together. So I'm not surprised by that. In fact, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I don't think there's very much I'm surprised about, but you know what? The reason is because I'm an interim. So, I walked into, here's what I have. I've walked into places where there was no executive, okay? Person's gone, they left. And they're talk about surprises, they come up. But the fact that I had Jennifer, she's still here, that she's here for a month. If you want to talk about a surprise, that's a nice surprise. And that there was a whole onboarding process. I'm telling you, that's rare for me as an interim. And if I asked my colleagues in the Interim Executive Network, who are all nonprofit interim executives here in the region, they'd all probably say the same thing. That's a surprise, that you had an executive that was still there, that planned how you should be onboarded, and that did it while they were, exiting themselves. So that's the surprise. Good
That's
surprise. Good surprise.
We love it. And Ruth in the comments said Jackie has no doubt seen worse, which is
Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah.
But I will also add that you are not new to this, you're true to this. So thank you for joining our team, and we're really happy you're here.
Thank you, Marissa.
Our former colleague also has a question for you, Jackie. Shell asks, what is your overall vision for the foundation as interim CEO?
So as interim, my vision for the foundation is to just continue the work of the foundation. Again, as interims, we're not about new strategic plan and new changes and all of that. We're about what do we need to do to keep the organization moving under the transition while the board makes critical decisions about where the organization is going. So the mission of the organization for me is the same. And very special to me, considering the move that the foundation has made to focus critically on women and girls of color. That mission won't change during my time as interim, because that's the work that needs to be done. And I will do as the interim everything I have to do to ensure that we are able to smoothly continue that work while the board is making its critical decisions about the direction of the organization.
Thank you for that. Well said. Now we have a question for both of you. What mechanisms from NITSA, what mechanisms are designed to support women in leadership positions?
Good question. Wow, that's a good question.
It is a good question. Do you want to start, Jackie?
Why don't you start?
First of all, hi NITSA, long time. I think NITSA was one of the first grantee partners of Stepping Stones when I started back in 2008. So hello, it's good to see you, hear from you. I think this is a hard one, in part because I've been examining a lot about the structure of nonprofits. I'm maybe going to go a little radical here for a second. Jackie and I have had some conversations about this, but the structure of nonprofits is like, we need a shared leadership, a true shared leadership model. The idea that it rests on the shoulders of one person, it's not realistic. And I think the dynamics sometimes that are set up between, executives and boards is also not healthy. And so I, as I think about what's next, would love to really do some deep thinking about ways in which we can change the structure, ways in which we can change some of those dynamics. And I don't yet have ideas what that looks like, but I think it is incredibly challenging. I think sometimes women can be our own worst enemies, meaning we are not always 100% supportive of our sisters. And that can be a real challenge as somebody enters into a leadership position. If you don't have a team around you, if you don't have sort of your support network or folks that are really cheering for you, rooting for you, but rather are actively engaging and seeing how or when you might fail, it becomes very difficult. So I think just from my own experience, surrounding myself with people who knew me at my core, may or may not have anything to do with the Women's Foundation necessarily, but would always be willing to give me very candid and honest feedback. So not always the yes person will say, yes, absolutely, you're doing everything right. And of course that was the right decision, but somebody who would challenge that a little bit was helpful for me, and to kind of create a team around you that is not staff and not board, but folks who are going to support you. They're going to listen to you when it's a really bad day and things are hard. They're going to give you that honest feedback to say, like, you know what, maybe you could have done that differently. Maybe you could have tried X, Y, Z. They're willing to problem solve with you, et cetera. I think that's really important. And that's something that I found I had to build on my own. It's not sort of handed over to you. It's not built into the process. But I do think it's really important. I think building into the process, providing executive coaching is incredibly, incredibly important to leaders. And that's something every board, I think, really should be doing to support, whether it's a permanent ED, it's an, whatever that looks like, providing an executive coach that the leader chooses is really, really important. I don't know, those are my off the cuff thoughts, Jackie. I'm sure you have much better wisdom.
Oh, I don't know if I have much better wisdom, but I like how you ended, because I think the executive coach piece is essential. I think that that women leaders, or any leader, but young women who are looking to become leaders should have that opportunity, just like an executive might have that opportunity. It's the opportunity to build on your skills and learn from your skills. And I've tried to recommend executive coaching as I've been an interim to any number of women I've worked with, and built a cadre or group of executive coaches that I know that are out there, female executive coaches who will work with other women to build their skills, because I think that's important too. And I'm just like you, Jennifer. I've just been fortunate. I've never turned down an opportunity to learn. And I've always learned from every woman that I've ever worked for. And, as I said, I was fortunate in one of my first jobs to have a small group, actually about 4 or 5 women who actually were leaders in the organization that I worked in, who had actually gone to school with my mother and Hampton University, if there's any Hamptonians out there, and knew me from, when I was little, but yet very subtly and very hands-on led me in my growth and development as I became a leader in the organization. And they became leaders, they became friends, and they became mentors. And I think we all, that's the other thing that sometimes we don't do as women, but having a mentor is a great thing. Someone who will listen to you, someone who will tell you when you're wrong, someone who will build you up and tell you when that's the exact direction you need to be going in, and someone who will say, sounds like a good idea. Who else could you go to and work with to make it happen? And I think that's the kind of thing that builds us as women. But I don't know that there's any one organization out there that does that. I think we as women find our own niche and our own group of women, typically women, who support us, who build on us, and who help us keep going. And I will say, as an interim, I get the opportunity to work with a lot of young women and women who are more seasoned. But I like to think when I'm working with those women, I'm listening to their ideas and supporting their ideas, even though I'm only going to be there for a short period of time. And I'm hoping that they're giving me ideas to make the organization successful. And I'd like to think that when I'm gone, I have been a mentor to those women in the organization, helping them determine direction. Where do I want to go? What do I want to do? What can I do to make the organization better? But I'm like you, Jennifer. I don't think there's any one group out there. I think we as women need to find those women that we most want to work with, that we want to emulate, and who we think inspire us, and work with them and bring them onto your team.
Yeah. Thank you. And just so you know, I'm saying this publicly, you are very inspiring. So thank you. This is a perfect last question from our friend Donna Caljohn. will you be opening an Etsy store to feature your amazing curated collection of feminist, social, and racial justice t-shirts? I think that's for Jennifer.
It's for
So
Jennifer.
Donna's saying, because that's funny, because my Stand With Black Women t-shirt is a Planned Parenthood t-shirt, which I believe, Donna Calajon, that was a gift from you. So thank you. That's pretty funny. And Jackie, when were you at Planned Parenthood? Because I think I was at NIFRA.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and lobbied with Jackie Payne.
Oh, I listen, I've been around a long time. So a long time. So you were probably with NIFRA, but not when I was there. So I was at Planned Parenthood when Gloria Feld was the president in 1998 to 2000. Yeah.
Okay.
So you weren't, I know you probably weren't at NIFRA then. Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
just after, but we just missed one another. So.
Yeah. Those are great years working. I've been involved with Planned Parenthood way before that because I served on the local Planned Parenthood Metropolitan Washington board, and I chaired that board, and I went back to the board, 2 times. So Planned Parenthood's been a part of my life for a long time, but working at the Federation was definitely one of the more exciting moments in my life during a time when, I can't even begin to tell you the challenges. Well, because you were in NIFRA, so yeah.
Yep.
Well, I hate to do this again, but it looks like we're out of time. So we're going to have to end our conversation here. You can keep the conversation going on Twitter with our hashtag #AskHerSeries, or, just DM us or tweet us, whatever makes sense for you. We're so grateful to have had this time with you today, Jennifer and Jackie. Thank you for agreeing to do this President's edition of Ask Her, because I thought you would say no.
I know, because you tried to trick me, but it's all right.
And thank you, Jennifer, for your legacy of leadership. We are beyond honored to have had a president and CEO for so many years who's cared so deeply for our mission and for us. And I'll share this quote. How lucky are we to have someone that makes saying goodbye so hard? So we're not really saying goodbye, but it's still very hard to see you go. And Jackie, thank you for taking a chance on us and also saying yes. We're excited to work with you and see what the future holds, but it is looking pretty bright from here. But I hope everyone stays in touch with us at the Women's Foundation. Again, visit our website. We hope you'll engage with us and our work, and of course, donate at thewomensfoundation.org. Jennifer and Jackie, thank you so much for being our champions and champions for women and girls. Are there any last words from either of you that you'd like to share with our audience?
I think my last words will be that Jennifer's been a great champion for women and girls and for women and girls of color during her tenure at the Washington Area Women's Foundation. And we have been so lucky to have you. And you will not be getting away from us. No matter what you decide to do, you will always be a part of the Washington Area Women's Foundation. And we will always look to you and need your advice and anything you can give us to continue the work. So thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jackie. And I am so thrilled that you agreed to be the interim president and CEO. And I do want to give a shout out to other organizations that might be thinking about transition. Interims are really an excellent way to think about moving through an organizational transition. I think it is a best practice in nonprofits, and so I strongly encourage folks to consider professional interims if there is an organizational transition. So I'm thrilled that you're here, Jackie, and taking the role. And I've said this before, but you're somebody that I've deeply admired and respected for a long time, and so I'm thrilled. It's been these last 3 weeks have been great to spend with you, and I know everything is in good hands, and it's going to be really wonderful. And then I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't make one last final request. Please donate. Please donate to the Women's Foundation. Support this work. It is so incredibly important now more than ever that we continue to invest in the power of women and girls of color. So I strongly encourage you, if there's anything, like my final ask as I'm leaving, please make a gift to the Women's Foundation. And I love all of you very much, and in particular the staff. And I'm not going to say any more because then I will cry, but thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.